All right, I just posted the link. Let's do our little waiting thing as people start to trickle in. Hey, holidays are coming, so I thought while we wait, give you a little entertaining Christmas lights. Originally, I thought I was going to decorate myself with this and it was going to look very funny, and then I tried to do it and it didn't seem to work at all, and it was really hot, and I thought maybe that would be a little funny, so I'm just kind of waiting for people to show up. Oh, hey, what's up? Hey, are you ready for the holidays? Well, these are totally appropriate any time of year, honestly. These lights are so nice and chunky. Woo woo! This is the waiting area. Waiting to begin. Gonna be a great show for you today. Don't forget the notes are right above this link on that Canvas page. That's got all the chapters we've been through so far. So fun. Let's keep the good times rolling. All right. Hey, great to see you. Looks like we got some viewers here now. And the first thing I'll do is the recap. Are you starting to get it? This is kind of like, this is going to be a running joke that I started last time, called Last Time in the DST and the CML. So there was me talking about the last time, and here I am talking about the last time as well. And every time you ask me to do this, I will just do this again every time. And it will get funnier and funnier, I hope, as we talk about fractals, self-organization, iterative processes. So last time we talked about self-organization and it was super awesome. We went through a lot of crazy examples of that, and actually the examples became so crazy. Like, here's the Belousov-Zhabotinsky reaction. Remember that? That was awesome. Here's the slime molds. Recreating the Tokyo subway map. That was fantastic. And then we had these crazy birds and a really cool video on emergence. All the links to that are right in the description of that video. And then I learned a good lesson in copyright law because my stream got shut down for copyright violation. Thank you, YouTube, for educating me. And I went and looked up fair use law and all that kind of stuff. And it's pretty complicated. So I did go back and write to every one of the owners of that material that I used. And I got permission from like 3 of them so far. Everyone who wrote me back gave me permission. So thank you very much to those who did give their permission. And I'm gonna try not to get shut down anymore. Okay, so that was a good lesson. Let's see. We got 4 viewers here. Okay, cool. So it looks like a lot of people are viewing it here. So let's get started with today's story on iterative processes. Okay, so here's the notes. Like I was saying, these are on the Canvas page. Please make sure that you take advantage of that if you want, because in this video I'll kind of say it, but I'm not going to read. I just saw a really professional presentation on professional presentations, kind of a fractal thing going on there, and told me not to read my slides. So I'm not going to read these notes, but just letting you know that you can find them. Okay, so this chapter is going to be on iteration, which is the repeated application of a rule to something. And the thing that you start with before you've applied the rule at all yet is the seed. And the rule that you apply over and over again, in my notes here I'm calling it the function. It goes by a lot of different names, sometimes called the generator or the map. But before we can even get into that and the nuts and bolts of how to iterate a process, the first thing we really need to talk about is the state, okay? Because what are we applying a rule to? What is the object of interest? And on our very first DST, we got introduced to the beautiful Sierpinski triangle. And we saw an illustration of this process where we started with an equilateral triangle and we iterated a certain process connecting the midpoints and making an upside down triangle in the middle, and then we kept doing that over and over again. So the state there that we started with was a triangle. Yeah, that's a little erythral. Usually in maths, we're going to use a quantity for the state. And so like when we do mathematical modeling, when we use these concepts here in terms of discrete difference equations or differential equations or partial differential equations, like the Gray-Scott model that I showed in self-organization workshop, all of those had states which were quantities. Numbers. Yeah, that's what mathematicians like to work with, the numbers, right? So we'll give you a couple examples of that, but really what we're trying to do here is kind of stretch our minds into that other zone where we think about things as an analogy, like Nonaka talks about in the Knowledge Creating Company. So I'll just give you number examples to get our feet wet, but really where we want to go is we want to stretch out and start to think of states as something beyond just numbers. There's a lot of things that I can kind of identify by feels. Like I can think about my mood, for example. Happy, I could think of that as a positive number. Sad, I could think of that as a negative number. And then just kind of calm, indifferent, that might be the 0 line, right? So that's an example of a state that I might be interested in studying the evolution of, but I can't exactly put some kind of meter in my brain and measure that number. And yet it still exists, and yet it's still very real. So those are the kind of things that I want you all to think about. In order to help a little bit, we're going to pull out an example from the 5th Discipline Field book. I believe a lot of people have been reading Peter Senge's fabulous book, The 5th Discipline. Did you know there's also a field book? The field book is awesome. It talks about how to put the concepts from the 5th Discipline into practice. So I've been listening really carefully to that book. It's a lot of fun, and it's got a lot of authors. And one of them is a person named Rick Ross, so that's why today's live stream is featuring Rick Ross. Originally, I was going to play the hustlin' video for you, even though it's not that Rick Ross. But after all that reading about the fair use and copyright stuff, I'm not even going to try that, because apparently you can't, there's no shortest clip that you can use that makes it fair all the time. So just go ahead and play that video on your own if you want. It's on YouTube. Nice vid. Anyway, it's not that Rick Ross, that was just a joke. But in the 5th Discipline Field book, this Rick Ross, a very wise person, talks about a tool called the moments of awareness. Moments of awareness, and this is just step 1. You'll have to see the field book to go through the whole exercise, but this is just what it pulled out. For this to talk about states, I'm calling this recognizing the state, this exercise, is that he says in step 1, you pause and ask yourself, what is happening right now? And stretch it out by asking yourself 3 subsidiary questions. What am I doing right now? What am I feeling right now? What am I thinking right now? Could the answers to those all be possible examples for a state? Something that we're using in terms of an analogy, not necessarily quantities that we can measure with a ruler, but something where we can recognize kind of that we're on a line somewhere, right? There's a positive version of it, there's a negative version of it, there's some kind of 0 line of it, and we can kind of feel out where we are on it. That's my question to you. We're starting this out with the polls right away. So I'm going to turn on our first poll, which is to give an example of a state in the Changemaker Lab, of course. Something that you can measure in some way, like how I feel today. Am I happy or sad or in between? That's not very precise, but it's something real to me. And the place we're going with this, why we want to focus on this right now, is because we want to predict or affect it. You see, it's something that we're seeking to predict or affect. And that's where we're going next as we analyze the process of iteration. So think of something, maybe in the context of your project, of your team company, of some other aspect of the Changemaker lab, or is it the Changemaker Live? I'm living it. Yeah. Think of an example, and I'm going to open up the poll right now and get all of your ideas. Okay, so if you go to the poll link, the usual poll link that we've been using, go ahead and submit some ideas, and I'm going to display those here just to warm us up for what we're going to talk about, which is the whole process of iteration. Let's see what kind of examples we got so far. Give an example of a state in the Changemaker lab. Here we got progress. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah. How much progress have we made? I can't exactly put a ruler on it, but you can tell if you're getting there or not, right? Income. Now that's very clearly a number. That's going to be an easy one. State of chaos. How much or little chaos is there? Confusion. I'm feeling that one a lot. Cost, polling, awareness, moments of awareness from Rick Ross. Yeah, these are all great ideas. And a lot of people are really focused on chaos. And I remember when we started this process in the Changemaker Lab, I felt like there was a lot of chaos. If I rewind my team company maybe back to week 4 or 5, the level of chaos, higher. How about in week 9? What's the level of chaos now in our team company? Lower. How did it evolve? That's where we're going next as we talk about iteration and the functions that determine where those trajectories go. Synergy, how much synergy are you feeling in your teamwork? Cooperation, how much cooperation do you feel like there is? How overwhelmed do you feel? Are you in a state of intuition? Interesting. Innovation, right? How much innovation is there? These are all great examples of things that conceptually we can kind of feel out that we got a plus or minus on, but we can't exactly measure them. However, loud silences? Did you mean long silences? I don't know. Silences as an amount of time we could measure. Loudness we could also measure in decibels. Happiness, my favorite thing to try to get. And actually I heard that some countries now, instead of focusing on their gross national product, some countries are focusing on their gross national happiness. So that's now becoming really real, and I think it's really valuable. How much teamwork is there? How much harmony? What kind of emotion? How united are you? How much participation are you doing? Yeah, right. What's the state of our evolutionary progress? What's our state of minds? What's our mental awareness? Pretty much every emotion. And that's not just one-dimensional. You know, there's all sorts of dimensions or facets to my jumbled up mind here. And so I could try to tease out individual strings of that and see if I can determine where I am on those lines. But really, it's a big ball of wax in there, which is why we covered self-organization. The combination of a whole bunch of different things interacting together. How much collaboration we have. These are all great examples. Thanks a lot. Okay, cool. So that was a fun warm-up. So now let's go a little further. What are we going to talk about now? Well, we're going to go on to the concept of iteration. Maybe we'll start with a little bit of mathematics. I know you want more and more math, and next quarter we're really going to be crunching some hard numbers that have to do with all of your businesses. So really excited for that kind of business math and stats stuff to get really going as you create your minimum viable product next quarter. Okay, so iteration has two real things of interest. The seed, that's what we start with, and the function, that's kind of the crank that we're turning again and again in order to evolve that seed. Okay, so it's got some expressions here, and look, oh, I tried to do some math, blah, blah, blah. You know what? I'm going to stop. I'm not going to read the slides. Why am I standing in front of the board? I haven't used the board yet, but this is a very useful board, and it has seen a lot of math. So let's go to the board for a little bit. Okay? Let's talk about iteration. We have a seed, and we have a function. Okay, and so what I had written in the notes there is that mathematically speaking, if I wanted to talk about the state as a variable x, and that's usually going to be a quantity for math, then I take my initial variable, my initial value as x sub 0. So this is sometimes called x naught or x sub 0, and that is the seed. That is the starting point, the initial quantity for my state. Okay? Now what am I going to do to that number there? I'm going to apply some kind of rule to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and put it inside of a function. And so that's a functional notation, f of x. I'm going to do f of x naught. I'm going to apply some function f to that initial seed. Okay? Then what happens? Well, whatever I get out of that functional engine is going to spit out my next iterate. So x naught is where I started. X1 is my next step. Okay, so I took one step. That's why it's x sub 1. But what am I going to do with that? I'm going to shove it right back into the function, and I'm going to apply the function again. You see? So what happens is the thing inside the function is called the input. What gets spit out is called the output, and then the output becomes the input. That's the key to the concept of iteration. The output becomes the next input, and then it spits out the next thing, x sub 2. The output becomes the input again. It spits out x sub 3. Next thing you know, you have this whole line of numbers. X naught, x1, x2, x3. And so that whole trail of numbers, a lot of times we like to graph that, you know, like where did I start? Maybe I started about here for x0, and then I went to here, then I went to there, then I went to there. Who knows? This is just a pretty random example. This is called the trajectory. The path that's laid out as I continue to iterate this process over and over, taking the output, putting in the input, leads me to a trail called the trajectory. This is how math allows us to predict the future, is through things like this. So the big question is, what is the function? What did it do to the seed? Where does the trajectory lead? That's what we're going to focus in on. Okay, so before we go off into imagination land and start to create some more synergy with our analogy examples, I want to show you a couple cool examples that use real numbers. The point here is going to be to show you how much cool stuff you can get out of a really, really simple rule. Incredibly simple rules leading to highly complex behavior. Where have I heard that before? That seems to be some kind of theme. You get a lot for a little. Kind of like me. 5-1, lots of fun. Okay, so let's start to think of some functional examples and see where they lead us. Like, let's say maybe, for example, I don't know, x sub n is equal to x sub n, x sub n plus 1 is x sub n plus, I don't know, how about 2? So here my function is x plus 2. Okay, so whatever I have as my seed, I'm going to start there. I'm going to add 2. Then whatever gets spit out, I'm going to add 2. I'm going to add 2. Such a simple function. I'm just going to add 2 every time. Okay, so let's say that I start with the seed here. X naught is equal to the number 1. Do you know what x1 is going to be? Right? So then x1 is going to be 3. x2 is going to be 5. x3 is going to be 7. x4 is going to be 9. Every single time I'm just adding 2, and I get this really interesting pattern. I happen to get a pattern of all the odd numbers. And if I graphed this pattern, what I'm going to get here is I'm going to get something that looks like this. A line. I get the pattern of a line. Just making sure you can see all that. Okay. Right. So this is a really simple rule. It's just adding 2. Turns out I get a trajectory that, graphically represented, is a line with a slope of 2. Its slope is whatever I kept adding over and over again. Its y-intercept, for those of you who have been there, is my starting point right here, my seed x0. That's what happens when you add. And you may have realized that subtracting is pretty much the same thing as adding, except you're adding a negative number. So every line that's going up comes out of this process. Every line that's going down, every line with a negative slope, also comes out of the same exact process. I would just use a negative number there. So simple of a process, and I have gotten every linear form ever. Now, when we start to really crunch the numbers in business math, you're going to see how important linear equations are to business. In fact, that's probably my most clicked on video. It's called Linear Equations in Business, that has thousands of views because this is so important to business. This is the linear modeling that helps us flesh out all of our costs and price the items that we're trying to sell. Such a simple little rule, though. Let's see another example. Okay? So, example 1, example 2, we're going to say that the next one is equal to the one from before. How about times by 2? Times by 2 instead of adding 2. How different could it be, really? Let's see. Let's start with the same seed there. We're going to start with the number 1. This time, though, we're going to times it by 2 instead of adding 2. So, times it by 2, times it by 2, times it by 2, times it by 2. Do you get the picture? Does anybody remember what kind of form this is? If you've been in that kind of math before, maybe you can try to picture it. Look, it goes up and up. It's just like the line, how it goes up, except it's going up way faster, obviously, because next time I'm going to double, double, double every time. And so, turns out we get all sorts of exponential growth. Wait, I've heard that before. Exponential behavior. Where did we talk about that? Compounding. Right. Remember compound interest, mortgages, annuities, all that kind of stuff? It all comes from this very, very simple equation where we just times by a number. And we get all exponential growth, all exponential decay. And this shows up all over the place in the sciences, in business, everywhere. You see, this is actually truly in mathematical modeling. Exponential behavior is more common than just additive behavior. It's probably the most common type of behavior, but such a simple little rule. Okay, we're just going to do one more, and then we're going to start brainstorming about analogies and what kind of iterative processes we see in the changemaker labs and what kind of rules might underlie those processes. Okay, so for my last example, I guess I'm going to have to make it a little more complicated, right? Because right here, I just did plussing. Right here, I just did timesing by number. How about I go over here and I do 2 times xn. Well, that's just like the one before, so I have to make it a little more complicated. How about I multiply it by 1 minus xn as well? What could possibly happen now that I'm also multiplying it by another term? And some people may recognize this extra term getting added from the study of ecology. This is a rate limiting term that results in the logistic model. So this is logistic. This is known as the logistic model. Okay. Okay, so here's the punchline to my joke here, is that the first one gave you every single line ever. The next one gave you all possible types of exponential behavior, growth and decay. And what happens when you apply this logistic model? Well, it really kind of depends on what number you have here. This number 2 or 3 or 4 or who knows what kind of number you put there. But depending on what kind of number you put right there, you can get all sorts of different behaviors. Okay, so one type of behavior, I'm just going to do the graphs now because I don't want to crunch too many numbers. not really even good at that in my head. One type of behavior that you can get from the logistic model is you can get kind of a topping off behavior. You see, so you go up for a while, but then you get stuck, and you get stuck at this one value right here. That is a really special type of behavior. Notice that lines keep going on forever. They just keep getting bigger forever. Exponentials also keep either getting bigger forever or they just go to zero and decay. But remember, that's a very interesting behavior, very special, and it's stable. It's stable because it's just staying at one spot. So we call it stable. And we also say it's stable at a fixed point because it stays stable at just this one point. It just ends up staying there forever. But that's not all. That happens for some values, maybe some small values of this number. But if you change to a little bit bigger of a number, another type of behavior that you can get out of the logistic model is you can get something like this. It can hop up and then down, and then up and then down, and then up and then down. That's another thing that lines can't do, exponentials can't do. This isn't that either. This is another unique, qualitatively different type of behavior known as oscillations. You ever experience anything that kind of like cycles around? Oh, now we're back here again. Yeah, all sorts of cycling behavior you can get from that same type of model. This same simple model, all I did was just change this one multiplying value in front. So I go from stable fixed point to all manner of cycles. This is what's called a 2 cycle because it cycles between just 2 values. But you can have a 3 cycle, 4 cycle, 5 cycle. You can have all sorts of different periodic cycling in the logistic model. And finally, you all's favorite word from the first poll that we just did. What else you can get here? You can get some kind of whack-ass kind of thing where you don't even know what's going to happen. It's going to go up and down, and it's never going to come back to the same place again. All over the place. Unpredictable. Doesn't settle down, and nobody can really say where it's going to go. We just all watch it happen. It's nuts. It's chaos. That's right. You can get chaos. That's right, folks. That simple little logistic equation in terms of this discrete iterative process can also yield mathematical chaos. That's a lot of different types of behaviors, actually. And that's kind of the point of this, is that you can take very, very, very simple, mathematically speaking, functions, and you can turn it into a whole treasure trove of different behaviors. And that's kind of the theme of dynamical systems theory, is classifying qualitatively different behaviors and just trying to analyze them and just adoring their wonderful beauty. So maybe we can decorate them a little bit because it's Christmas. Kind of give them a little bit of a spotlight there. There you go. Chaos. You can have some Christmas chaos. There you go. Okay, cool. So we're going to go into the analogies next, but you know, I can't resist showing you cool stuff every time we meet. And so I just want to show you one little cool video before we move on. The logistic map, that's what I was just talking about, right? Now, because I just showed you that the logistic map can create so many different types of behavior, you might be wondering, is there some kind of display that shows us all the different types of behavior we could get out of this map? Because I really want to know, like, how many different types of things and what kind of things. There is a way to display this. It's called the bifurcation diagram. Kind of mentioned it before in our last one about self-organization, and I'll keep coming back to this concept because bifurcation diagrams are one of the best tools we have in dynamical systems theory. And this one for the logistic map here, you can see the functional form of it, just like I wrote on the board there. Except the letter A is where you would pop a number. So the letter A there is where I had the number 2. What I'm going to show you is a picture of all the different types of dynamic behaviors you can get for all the different values of A. So on the horizontal axis is going to be values of the parameter A. And on the vertical axis is an expression of where we end up as we iterate that trajectory over and over again. Okay, and here's just kind of an example of a 2 cycle. Let me just go back there for a minute so you can see that. So like I was saying, this logistic map is capable of cyclic behavior, and you can see here that if you put in that red number, out pops the blue number. Then if you put in the blue number, out pops the red number. And so you get stuck back and forth, flip-flopping in a 2 cycle. And you can see if you look there that they're showing you the location. They tell me that for the value of A of 3.3, so if I had put a 3.3 there, I would have got that flip-floppy 2 cycle behavior. And so that's why I see 2 prongs on that pitchfork looking thing right there. Okay, so remember the horizontal axis is the value of A. So for other values of A, especially if I slowly kind of turn up the A higher and higher, what other kind of cycles do I get? 4 cycles, 8 cycles, 16 cycles. It goes through something called a period doubling bifurcation. Maybe something I could talk about later. Don't want to get too sidetracked. We're just kind of in the beginning phases, but just look at this picture for a minute of this bifurcation diagram and look at what happens when you zoom in on it. So I'm zooming in on it. I'm zooming in on very specific values of A. This is not a simple structure. This structure seems to have little itty-bitty copies of itself hidden inside of every nook and cranny of itself. I'm zooming in on it, and I keep seeing the same thing, and no matter how much you zoom in, I keep getting the same thing. What does this remind you of? I don't need to say it right. It's got a fractal structure. It's amazing. It's crazy. It's unbelievable. But it's true. Such simple things, such complex behaviors, and there seems to be some kind of theme, connection between iteration and fractal structure. Back to the Changemaker Lab, because that's what it's all about. And now I want to try to get some analogies from you all. After we've kind of gotten our feet wet here, seeing some illustrations of different types of mathematical iterative processes, what kind of iterative processes might we have encountered in what we've learned here in the lab? Again, I look to my friend from the 5th Discipline Field Book, Rick Ross. He's got a lot of great examples in that field book that actually apply Senge's theory of the 5th Discipline in real situations. That's why the field book is so cool. So there's this other tool he calls the fivewise. And he says the purpose is an alternative method for telling your story. You hunt backward for the root cause of a pernicious recurring problem by just asking why over and over and over again. So the, well, I don't want to say the example he gives in the book, because really I want you to think of your own examples. What we're going to try to do here is we're going to think about this process, this iterative process. The seed is going to be some kind of initial observation. Like maybe I observe oil dripping on the floor. And I'm like, why is that oil dripping on the floor? And I look up and I say, oh, because there's a leak. Well, why is there a leak? Oh, because the gaskets are loose. Well, why are the gaskets loose? Oh, because we got a good deal on gaskets and they were all really cheap. Why did you do that? Now this place is a mess. Okay, so continuing to ask why, and then every reason you get out, you put it back into the process of why and ask why again, can often be a stable process. That's what I was trying to say about stability and fixed points, is that it's a stable process that leads you towards a very specific place. And here, the fixed point would be the root problem. So a lot of times when we observe things, we might be able to observe a variety of seemingly unrelated things. And it turns out that all these things are caused by the same pernicious recurring problem. That's why we do the 5 whys. We iterate that process and we get to the root of the problem. Okay, so does this sound familiar to you at all? And anything that you've experienced here? Can you name some new root problems? So I'm kind of starting this one backwards. I'm going to ask you all first to think about the fixed point, because the fixed point really is the most important part. That's, remember I was talking about trajectories. We're trying to figure out where did the trajectory go. And so if it's going towards one spot, we kind of really value that one spot. That's why those fixed points were what was being displayed on the bifurcation diagram. So here's my activity ask for you. Let's brainstorm a root problem. Think of a problem that all sorts of different seeds, if we put them in the fivewise process and we turn that crank 5 times, all those seemingly unrelated things would all lead to the same answer, because root problem. I'm going to brainstorm you all and ask you if you can give me some ideas for the root problem. Where is the fixed point of this process? And we're going to do this in a brainstorm mode, because hopefully some kind of very familiar root problem is going to rise to the top. And then we're going to go backwards and say what kind of seeds might have led there. Because what Rick Ross is saying in the field book is that seemingly unrelated, whole grab bag full of different problems are not really the root problem. They're just observations, and they're just symptoms. They're just symptoms of the real problem. Okay, so now I've turned on the poll for you all, and I'm going to be looking for your brainstorms. Go ahead, please throw in your ideas for a root problem. Name a root problem to which the fivewise process would lead. And this is a tough one, honestly. This isn't an easy question. So I put it in brainstorm mode. So even if you can't think of one, could you just give your thumbs up or thumbs down so that we can order the ideas and kind of create a consensus where we can zero in on one of these things, and then we can riff off that for our next activity. What kind of seeds would lead there? Okay, so let's see what you all coming up with so far here. Okay. Poor communication. Been there. Lack of funds. Lack of knowledge. Foundational beliefs about self and other. Ooh, that's deep. Lack of motivation. Let's be honest. Self-reliance, ego, pride, age. Cool, so let's play this game together. Please, I see some participation here. I see like 3 or 2 thumbs ups, but even if you don't have an idea, please participate by throwing your opinion into the pot. And I'll give this another minute, and we'll see what rises to the top here. And then we'll think about what kind of seeds. The seeds are really the observables. What kind of observables are really caused by poor communication or self-reliance as the root problem? Kind of a battle for first here. Poor communication, like that definitely sounds like a problem to me, especially because it's got the word poor. I'm a little more confused about self-reliance, the other top leader, because sometimes it might be good to know that you can rely on yourself, but in the context of teamwork, maybe that's why you all are naming it as a problem, is because in the Changemaker Lab, we want to be on teams. We want to work in teams. And so if we're all kind of siloed in our own self-reliance, is that why it's a problem? That's just what I'm wondering. I wonder if I influence the poll. I don't know. I'll go to stop. Other ideas. Age is not a problem. Thank you for downvoting that because, like a fine wine, we just get better with age. That's not a problem. Foundational beliefs about self and other. Ooh, how interesting. That's kind of a lead in into one of my next examples. We're going to totally unpack that later about the foundational beliefs. So I'm going to save that one for later because I know that I'm going to touch on it. Let's go with poor communication so that we can continue on to the next exercise. So now that we've named poor communication as the issue, now I want you to start trying to brainstorm, or not brainstorm, but just share open-ended responses to what kind of observables. The observables are the seeds. Name some seeds that if you put it through the 5 whys, well, why did they this? Well, why did that? Why that? Oh, because we're not communicating. Because poor communication is really the root of the problem. But what are we observing? Overanalyzing things. Yeah, you're not responding. Beating yourself up. Negativity. Impatience. These are great. You see, these are all different things that I'm sure all of us have observed some point or another. And yet, if you put it through the 5 whys process, it might turn out that the real root problem here is lack of communication. Because teamwork relies on communication. That's what we talked about in the self-organization workshop, is how much the system is really set up to have ideas emerge from it when we communicate. We have to have that coupling and communication with each other, and transparent dialogue, straightforward talk, and everybody has to give their input. Yeah, turning everything off. Intolerance, that's a good one, right? That's a totally an observable, but that's not the root problem. Because once we all start to communicate, it leads to empathy, it leads to understanding, and then we're back on track. Yeah, let's take it seriously. Cool. These are some Wi-Fi. Well, I don't know how the root problem for Wi-Fi might be lack of communication. But lots of these are, I can totally see it. And this 5 whys is really something that I would say we have to learn by doing. You're not going to learn this by listening to me give you examples. I haven't really experienced anyone use this yet, but I think this would be a great idea for team companies. We're all working in these team companies where we have a bunch of diverse individuals, different points of view, lots of different mindsets, and what if we turn the crank on why? We started with something, brought it to the team company, a problem that we think is a problem, but we don't know how to solve it. And we keep asking why that is. And every time someone says why it is, we take the reason that they said and we put it back in the function. And we say, why is that? And why is that? And we iterate it out. And I wonder what kind of root problems we might draw conclusions about. I want to see this happen in a team company setting. I just want to see this happen. I think this would be really interesting exercise to do. And so you'll see in my notes, if you ever read them, that my next poll is going to be, what seed would you like to put into the 5 whys process? What kind of seed, if you could take a seed and plant it into your team company and crank those 5 whys, what question would you want to bring? What makes some good seeds? These are great examples of seeds that might lead to lack of communication. But now, next, I just want you to think about what kind of seed that you observe right now and you think would be an interesting thing to put into the 5 whys process, not knowing where it's going to go. And maybe you might want to bring it to your team company and actually try it. I'd love to see that. I think that would be super interesting. Remember, a seed for the 5 whys process would be something that you kind of feel like is an issue or something and you want to know why. Like, why is there oil on the floor? Why do you seem so indifferent when we talk? Why are you passionate? Why do you have empathy? That's great if you have them, but I don't know if that's what I really meant. What I'm looking for here is like a problem. Like, these things don't look like a problem to me. These things look like good things. But is there something that you've observed in our work in the Changemaker Lab that's kind of an issue, and you want to know why is that happening? Yeah, like lack of participation. Like why do you never talk? And we're all together trying to work together, and why don't you turn your camera on? I know some people can't. Some people don't have the Wi-Fi, some people don't have a camera, but if you do have the ability to turn your camera off, and we're working together really closely in 4-hour, 8-hour chunks, week after week, why? Why don't you have confidence? That's a really good question. And I don't think lack of confidence is really the root problem. It's an observation. I wonder what really underlies that observation. Why aren't we being productive? What's going on here? That's not the root problem, but once we unpack it with the 5 whys, we're going to realize something. And maybe as we realize that and start to solve that root problem, other observable issues and problems are going to just disappear. Because like what Rick Ross is saying in the field book is that there's going to be a whole grab bag of different seeds, a whole bunch of different observables that all have the same root problem. So if we just pull out the root, we're going to get all those problems are going to disappear. Why don't I have self-awareness? Why is there so much silence? Why is there a lack of direction? I hope that you will consider trying this in your project groups. Maybe you have an issue about your project that has an underlying cause, and a lot of these speak to things that we've observed in our team companies, and that's just where we are right now. It doesn't mean that that's where we're going to stay, but it's an observable that needs to be unpacked with the 5 whys. Why do we keep forgetting to practice dialogue? Why am I so emotional? Great questions, great ideas. Let us try to pop those in the 5 whys. Process some time. Why don't I get the leadership roles? Why do I feel so disconnected? These are all great symptoms. Why do I keep relying on others rather than building my own skills? Maybe I could do the 5 whys on myself. Why are you pretending like you're paying attention instead of bailing? Yeah. These are great. I mean, these are real. Straightforward talk. It's okay to ask why over and over and over again. Cool. So let's go back to the notes a little bit here. What seed would you use for the 5 whys? It says there in the notes, bring your seed to your team company or project team and watch it grow roots. Because if you've ever really saw a seed germinate, it does grow roots first, and that's the root problem that we're looking for. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about stability because that is a huge theme for dynamical systems theory, hopefully the theme of future workshops. And I'm going to put in context of this game called Telephone. Have you ever played that game when you were a kid? And you have like a birthday party, well, before COVID, and so we had a bunch of kids around a table, right? And then first person would think of a phrase, and then they'd whisper it into their neighbor's ear. And then that person would whisper what they heard, and that person would whisper what they heard. And it would go and go and go all along. And then the last person at the end of the line announces what they said, and it's like totally different than what the first person said. Hilarious little kids' birthday party game. Iterative process. The seed is whatever the first kid said, and the function is listening in and then repeating what you said as a whisper. Okay, so I'm kind of doing a little check-in right now to understand if people got the concept of stability And again, we'll go back into that in another workshop, I hope, but just to get us a little bit accustomed to it, from what we talked about with the 5 whys iterative process and the fact that that often leads to the same root problem, and a bunch of different seeds all go to the same root problem. In terms of math, that's the hallmark of a stable process. A stable process attracts all the seeds to the same fixed point. It's often called an attractor. An unstable process is the opposite of that. Things go away. They always go up, they always go down, but they're not settling down to a fixed place. That's an unstable process. So this is just going to be a quick multiple choice. What about that telephone example? Is that stable or unstable? So I'm going to ask you all that. Just go ahead and keep responding there. I've just switched it over, but thanks for your input for the 5 whys seeds. Those are really great. And remember that all the poll responses are going to be available on the Canvas page, same page where you saw this link. And I think I'm going to go back to that Canvas page after this and look at those answers again, because those are some really good ideas for seeds to throw into the process. Okay, so that 5 whys process was, I would claim, if it's done well, a stable process. Because all sorts of different stuff, different initial conditions that you start with, they all tend toward the same root problem. That would be the fixed point. But in the game of telephone, I whisper something, and you're supposed to actually be repeating the same exact thing you heard. You're not supposed to change it, right? But then at the end of the day, even though we were all supposed to say the same thing we heard, it like becomes something totally different. What the hell? Does that sound stable or unstable? You got it. Right. It's an unstable process. So that's kind of a comparison. Unstable processes do not settle down to a fixed point, and kind of prefer the stable processes, because if I'm trying to predict something and I want to have an idea of where it's headed, it's nice to know that things are going to settle down to that thing. Okay, so that was just a little bit of a warm-up. What we're going to do next is we're going to talk about another big iterative process for the Changemaker Lab, which is dialogue. And the reason I brought you that telephone example first is because it's kind of like dialogue, except like just a little kid fun version thing. But in the Changemaker Lab, as easy as it is to say, it's very hard to practice proper dialogue. One of the things you actually had as a seed before was, why don't we practice dialogue? I wonder why we keep forgetting to practice dialogue. Dialogue is an iterative process, right? You're supposed to repeat what was last said before you take your turn speaking. We all take a turn speaking in dialogue. Nobody takes up too much space. Everybody contributes something. And before you speak, you say what the other person said. So the seed is, okay, let's have an example actually, because dialogue can be practiced on a lot of different stuff, right? But let's say that one of the things that team companies are supposed to help its members with is solving problems from your project company's Motorola's. So let's say you have a project team and you went out and you did a customer visit, and maybe it didn't go exactly how you wanted it to go, and you come back with your post Motorola and there's a problem. The idea of the teams of teams is that we can take that problem from our project's post Motorola and we can bring it to our diverse team company, and we can practice dialogue on that problem. The problem from the post Motorola is the seed, and then the trajectory is everybody helping to create a solution. The solution is a self-organizing emergent process that's created with the team. It's not like one of the dozen people in this room has the answer. It's more like these dozen minds gel together and they synergize. And then through this iterative dialoguing process, a solution emerges that didn't exist before. It's amazing. But it's not going to work all the time, especially if it's not done right. So I have these two bullets here, number 1 and number 2, because the seed is easy. The seed is the problem. that you're bringing from your post-Motorola. But what's the function? The function, I guess I forgot to say this on the board before, but for dynamical systems theory, the function is the heart of the matter. The function is what is analyzed to be stable or unstable. Seeds are not called stable or unstable. They're just little seeds. The function is the structure. Peter Senge says the structure is what determines behavior in an organization, and the function is the structure of an iterative process. And yes, mathematically, we analyze the functions to determine whether the process will be stable or not. So what is the function in dialogue? I have kind of two comparison choices here. Number one is, well, we're supposed to repeat what the last person said, right? Okay, so I'm gonna, I have a thing that I'm ready to say, but I repeat what that person said, and then I say what I was gonna say. But in number one, I'm just repeating what that person said, and I'm waiting to speak. Okay, I already had my idea, I'm holding my idea in my head, and I'm waiting, everybody's talking, oh, here comes my turn, I gotta say what you said, okay, I did it, I said what you said, and now I'm saying my thing. That's my function. That's function number one. Not proper dialogue. That's not, remember, in an iterative process, we take the last output and we use it as our input. So in number one there, even though you repeated it, you didn't synthesize it into what you were gonna say. You were just waiting to speak, right? So you're not actually iterating. In number two, you're listening actively, and it might take you a little while to think about it. That's okay, because one of the tenets of dialogue is waiting, right? So I'm listening, I'm active listening. I heard what the last person said, and before I speak, I try to use that as the input, and you actually make constructive use of that input, and then whatever I say has been affected by what the last person says, right? That's the proper dialogue, is that we use the last output we use the last output as input to our thought. We're not just sitting there waiting to say whatever we thought right off the bat. We use that, and that way it takes the seed and it evolves the seed. And the seed, which is a problem, is supposed to evolve into a solution. If you're not doing number two, if you're not doing this proper dialogue, then the seed's not really evolving. You see? So why didn't we get a solution to that person's problem out of the dialogue? Maybe this is the issue. Maybe it is. So that's what I kind of wrote down here, and I kind of wanted to do a little poll to ask you to reflect on that. You know, I'm not trying to judge. We all do it. I've been there myself. I just feel nervous. I had a thought, and I'm so nervous to speak that I just didn't even think about what you just said. What I want to do now is play with a clickable image where it says, think about how you use dialogue. In dialogue, how much are you using the last statement as actual input? How much do the other statements that have been said affect what you say? So if the answer is no effect on the left-hand side of that line, that means you're kind of in the number one category where you're not really using the input. If you're over on the right-hand side and it very strongly affects what you said and you're synthesizing it, that's where we get to start gelling. That's where we get the synergy that leads to emergence of the solution, right? That none of us really have, but that all of us want to create together. So I'm going to activate that poll just because I want to kind of know, how's it going with the dialogue? It's been a while. It's week 9 now. How's it going? This is just a general statement. I'm sure you're thinking, well, it's different depending on what's being dialogued on. But just think in general. Click somewhere on the line, wherever you feel like you are on that line. I have some tips in the notes there to make sure that we stay on point. Some of the tips are, before you speak, before you say whatever you're about to say, think about, were you using what already was said as input? Make sure that seed is evolving. Make sure the subject hasn't been changed. So a hallmark of the broken chain of dialogue is if somebody has some other thing. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about cheeseburgers right now. So whatever everyone says, sure, I'll repeat what they said. But when it's my turn, talking about cheeseburgers. If you do that, you break the chain. And then the seed that we were trying to evolve into a solution, is not going to get where it needed to go. And so the third tip is that communication leads should really make sure that you monitor it, and really everyone, but especially communication leads, kind of watch out for that and make sure that the subject isn't just being wildly changed. We need to stay on that same seed. If the seed is truly evolving after 5, 6, 7, 8 people speak, we should still be able to see nuances of the seed. We should be able to see that this trajectory is an evolution, an evolved version of the seed. Okay, let's see what people are saying in the polls there. Kind of all over the place, like our last clickable image. But actually kind of good, more people in the middle. So it's not like you have to have whatever was just said doesn't have to completely change your mind. But it should have some effect. You should be using it as input some way and synthesizing it, because that's how the self-organization takes place. And so that's what we have. There was one on the left and then it moved over when it saw the cloud. That's okay. The important thing here is that we reflected on it and that we're probably going to think about it more now that we've talked about it. Cool. Thanks for your participation. We just have a little bit more to go. And so that was about dialogue. Now this is my last one. Another great example from Rick Ross. And this goes back to your own personal beliefs and your own values and beliefs that somebody named in one of the previous polls. So all these examples, remember, are part of the 5th discipline field book. Not the 5th discipline by Peter Senge, but his follow-up, the field book, in which him and his friends talk about how they applied that in all their business ventures and stuff. It's super good. That's where you'll find this mental map, or this tool called the ladder of inference. And Rick Ross calls the ladder of inference a common mental pathway of increasing abstraction, often leading to misguided beliefs. It doesn't have to, but often seems to. Okay, and this to me looks like an iterative process. I'll show you why I think that. So we start down here at the bottom of the ladder with an observable, some data that we saw, an experience, and just the picture of that. That's the seed. Okay, and as we climb the ladder, we are iterating some kind of process in our head. What's the function? Who knows? Am I going to be able to say it? Probably not. I have thought about it quite a bit, and I still can't say what my function is, but somehow I climb this ladder where I take that data and I select bits of it from what's there, and I add meaning to it from my own cultural and personal life, and I make assumptions based on that meaning. I draw conclusions based on those assumptions. I adopt beliefs, and then I take actions based on the beliefs. And what pops out the top, you can see, is a reflexive loop, because once we adopt those beliefs, it says our beliefs affect what data we select next time. So the output becomes an input and somehow affects the system. It's not as obvious as a game of telephone or even as obvious as dialogue, but there's some sort of iterative process going in there. And this is something that is actually really hard to practice. Not hard. Dialogue's hard to practice. This happens a lot, okay? So this is going to be our last little exercise. We're going to have a role-playing game. Who likes role-playing games? Well, this is probably not one of the ones you like Final Fantasy, but we're just going to play a role. Since we're all here to learn about leadership, put yourself in the shoes of the team lead, or the hat, or whatever. You're the team lead. You are the team lead in your learning company, and it's time to talk about the learning compasses. Remember how we were all supposed to share our learning compasses with each other in our team company so we could create our common why? Okay. The work of the learning company speaks to everyone's learning compass, right? It's supposed to emerge out of that sharing. And remember how we were supposed to share them on the Changemakers team? Have you shared yours? This is just a warm-up multiple choice poll here. It's okay to be honest, because we are in anonymous mode. Go on Changemaker's team right now and scroll over your icon. Is your learning compass shared in your profile? This is just a yes or no question, and it is anonymous. Have you shared your learning compass right now? No, don't go do it right now so you can click yes, but just tell me. Like, is it up there as of right now? And the reason that I'm asking that is because with my team lead hat on, I am learning servant leadership. What is servant leadership? It's acting as a leader by serving all of the members in the team. How do you serve the members in the team? You learn about them through their learning compass. You read their learning compass and you try to tease out all the learning goals of all your team members and incorporate all of those into the work of the team company. Okay, so I'm team lead and I'm trying to do that. Go over to my team and I'm looking to see if you've posted your learning compass. Before we move on, let's just see where that is. Have you shared your learning compass? Well, we got 12 yes and 5 no. That's out of 17 people responding, and good job hanging in there and still participating. So out of the 17 maybe highly participatory entrepreneurs in the class, 18 of them, even 5 of those have still not shared their learning compass online. Oops. Okay, well now how's the team leader supposed to learn servant leadership if you're not giving them the input that they need to apply servant leadership, right? That's the aha moment from this part of it. And so going back to the notes here, I hope you're on Changemaker's team right now. You probably are because you just checked that. So I want you to find someone in your team company who has uploaded the learning compass. There's got to be, because the team companies have a lot of people in them, so you got to be able to find at least one person, scroll over their little icon, and read their learning compass. Remember, you're pretending to be the team lead right now, and so you're going through all the learning compasses, trying to incorporate everyone's learning goals into the work of the team company. Okay? Go ahead and find one that actually exists on there and read it. And the question that I'm going to ask you in the next poll is, what action comes out of your ladder of inference as you read this compass? So I'll go back to the ladder there so you can see the visual. And I want you to take a few moments to actually read someone's learning compass in your team company. And use that as the observable. Use that as the seed. Add your own meanings, make your own assumptions, draw your own conclusions, adopt your own beliefs, take action. And this is you as the servant leader, team lead of the learning company. What action are you going to take now that you've read that? What I'm trying to do is help us think about, first of all, how hard it is to be team leads, and shout out to all the team leads learning servant leadership in program right now, because it's super hard. And I definitely recommend that everyone try to get a chance taking a leadership role so you can learn by doing. That's the point here. And even in the role playing though, after you read that, if you were the team lead, what would you do? Would you take any action? Is there some, I don't know. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to open the poll. And there's going to be all sorts of different answers, because I think people are going to be reading all sorts of different learning compasses. There's really no right answer here. It's just an exercise for all of us to play that role, realize what it is, and then kind of fold it in with what we're doing inside our own heads. Because we're climbing this ladder all day in different ways. Every time I see anything, I'm climbing this ladder. And there's going to be different ways I can climb it, different functions. Some of those are going to be stable. Some of those are going to be unstable, maybe chaotic. Some of those are going to lead to misguided beliefs, probably. That's what Rick Ross says in the book. Another hard question. I don't see any responses yet. Oh, well, it's probably taking you a little while to read it. Okay, so Go ahead and read it thoughtfully. Ooh, I got one. Oh, here they come. Here come the responses. Hold on a second. I'll display them. This is so fun. Thank you for putting stuff in the polls. You all are making this awesome. As hard as I try, you are what makes it really awesome. So I'm gonna start down at the bottom there because they came in so fast. First one was updating common why for the team. Right. Oh yeah, we were supposed to. Oh, oops, that one's not spoken to. Find more opportunities for the team member to utilize their creative bent. Nice, because everyone's supposed to be learning in their own learning goals. We have more in common than I thought. Helps give you an inside look on how they learn and assists you in your ability to share information effectively. Nothing, maybe that person that you read their learning goals already incorporated in, so you don't have to do anything. Or you just realize that people are very complex walking autobiographies. You could try to encourage them to share their skills and passion. Right. Create to perhaps ignite a creative spark in others. Nice. I like the way that was put. Make some edits in my own profile. Oh, that's so interesting. So reading someone else's learning compass makes you think more thoughtfully or realize something new about yourself. Ensuring we're helping everyone's learning. That's servant leadership. That is the most beautiful type of leadership that I've ever heard of. Ability to understand someone in ways that I couldn't, and what we could share verbally. Sometimes you need to put it in words. Brainstorm a way to incorporate their skills and their passion. Yeah, right. So if you haven't scrolled through all your team members' learning compasses, there might be a lot of cool stuff in there, a lot of sparks that could lead to new directions that we haven't even thought of yet. We need to get that input and get that into the iterative processes. That's great. Okay, so now I want to do the flip side of that, and this is going to be the last thing for today. Thanks for staying with me. Now you're trying to look over everyone's learning compasses, right? Because you saw how valuable that just was. So now you're scrolling on all your team members to read everyone's learning compass, and then for one, you observe that one member doesn't have a compass posted. Now pretend, for this next poll, pretend that your observation now is that there's no compass posted. Now what are you gonna do? Now what's gonna happen in your ladder of inference if your observation is that there's no compass for this person? It's gonna be different than when the observation was reading information, trying to compare that now with trying to find information that you want to use and not getting anything. What happens then? So I just want to note that there's, from the last poll about reading someone's learning compass, there's a lot of really great stuff coming in here. And because we're short on time, I'm not going to go back to it right now. But all of these things are being saved on the Canvas page. So this is another thing, like the seeds for the 5 whys, where I'm going to come back and read this one again on the Canvas page. There's a lot of really thoughtful responses to this poll. Thank you for that. And because I want to make sure there's enough time for the next workshop right after this, our last poll here is the flip side of that coin. What happens when you look for team members' compass and you saw 5 out of 18 respondents didn't even have theirs up? Goose eggs. Nothing. Now where does your ladder go? Let's look at the ladder again. So now my next poll is that the observable is there's no compass. What's my action that's going to pop out the top? Maybe this is an easier question. Maybe it's harder. I don't know. Let's see the responses. We got 3 responses so far. What comes out of your ladder when you observe no compass? Try to reach out to help. Now that's a good servant leader, right? What's going on? Check in. Maybe why? Going back to the 5 whys. Why didn't they do it? Do they need help doing it? Meh. Come on, you got the leadership hat on right now, and you're just gonna meh? Just pretend you're the servant leader, the team lead. What are you gonna do when you see someone has no learning compass? Observe, make notes, ask them, help them develop their learning compass. And as you help them develop, turns out you might be helping yourself too and everyone else, because the point of this is we want input. We want there to be input, and we want to make use of the input. That's proper dialogue. That's proper iteration. That's what leads to emergence. Speak to the group. Don't single people out. Just reach out to that one person individually, or just speak to it generally. That's why I'm bringing it up right now, because I know it's an issue. I'm not going to go on there and say who's who, but I can see it's an issue. So do people need help? Who are they going to go to for help? Their teammates, their leaders. That's so nice that you want to help. Very nice. Okay, great. So thank you for participating today. I'm going to close it out now, and I'll say this is just the tip of the iceberg for iterative processes. Iterative processes is like a huge topic. I'd love to talk about it more. There's lots of different iterative processes that I haven't mentioned yet, so hope to come back to soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for playing the game, and see you later.